It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. Joining me, as usual, all the way in Hong Kong, is Hong Kong Jack. How are you, mate?
I'm good.
Libs spill, I was thinking before, it's number 4. I'm not going to count the ones where post-election, where positions are made vacant, but it is Libs spill number 4 since 2013, Jack. That's one every parliamentary term, basically. What's happening? Do you know? The problem we've got is that as we're recording this on the 12th of February, the meeting, we're recording at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, AEDT, where the spill motion has been called for 9 a.m. tomorrow. So we're in speculation land, Jack, but it looks like Angus has got the numbers.
I noticed this morning that I saw James Patterson resigning from the front bench and coming out and saying that he would back Taylor. And he always looks a sort of a key player to me. He's their busiest guy, Jack. You know, he takes on the most convincing. He's the most convincing as well.
Probably, right? Yes. He has put this down, the spill tomorrow, as a change or die moment, Jack. That's pretty grim, isn't it?
Yeah.
And look, may I at least propose an alternate future, Jack, where Susan Ley prevails, and a change or die moment, well, that's not something you can take back, Jack.
No, you can't. I don't think she will survive. Can I just give a little shout out to a woman you used to do those panel shows with, Parnell Palm McGuinness?
Oh, yeah. I don't think I was ever on with her.
You didn't get quite that far down the food chain.
No.
I like this little contribution. In these glass cliff situations, the man usually waits until the woman has absorbed all the ire and done the hard yards on repairs before seizing the job back. You could call Angus chivalrous. I thought that made me chuckle.
Yeah, well, look, that is one way of looking at things, Jack. I'm getting the feeling that Labor really can't believe their luck here again. There's so much to get on Angus about, and I've felt a considerable amount of restraint being shown because Susan Ley, it wouldn't look good attacking her as hard as they might go Angus. Here's a bit of a guess on what we might a prediction on what they might go Angus on, Jack. And this is from Tanya Plibersek at a doorstop this morning, I think on the ABC. Plibersek says, look, this saga has been running longer than home and away, and it is really important for the country that it's sorted out. The National Party were focused on their leadership on the National Day of Mourning. The Liberals were focused on their leadership at Katie Allen's funeral. It's not good for the country to have this sort of uncertainty. It's a matter for them who their leader is. Looks like they're leaning towards Angus Taylor. I mean, he's the bloke that as Shadow Treasurer actually went to the last election promising higher taxes and higher deficits. He's the bloke that cost them their economic credibility. He hid 22% energy price increases. He released dodgy documents around Clover Moore's travel. There's the Jamland scandal. There's the dodgy water buybacks. He even said that he'd lived up the road from Naomi Wolf when he absolutely didn't. So it looks to me like in the modern Liberal Party, an incompetent bloke beats a woman any day of the week, and the only real qualification for leadership is XY chromosomes. Thank you. And doorstop over. Yeah. There's a long list there, Jack.
He can, if he wins, and I think he probably will, he can look forward to plenty of that.
Yes, it looks like they've pushed the files around on the server there, Jack. Maybe in the group chat.
Yeah.
So
of course, the thing with these when you get these changes is that you're never quite sure how people are going to go until they get the job.
Yeah, I think there's a sense of that. If memory serves me, when Howard was won the election, finally won the party room over after the failed exercises with Downer and Downer's predecessor,
John Hewson.
Hewson.
Yeah.
They went to Howard, and I think everyone would have had a bit of a laugh at that. And there was the old Mr. 15%. Why does he bother? The trouble with that argument is, Jack, where do women voters aren't going to be rushing back, are they?
No. But there were all sorts of reasons why no one thought that Howard would be a success. And I'm not saying Taylor will be a success. I'm just saying it's my habit, having learnt down the years from particularly from the Howard example, just to wait a little bit and see how do they actually go when they get the job.
I think there's a bit of a champing at the bit going on, Jack, and I reckon they will get stuck in.
There was with Howard as well. They thought that, well, this is great. We've got
this is your apprenticeship's over. This is your time in the spotlight, and look, there's a fair bit of baggage there, as I say. I just wanted to go through the numbers.
Can I just add something there? That works both ways. Some people get into the job and they shrink. Some people get the job and something happens to them and they grow and they prosper, right? But both things can happen. The Libs could change to Angus Taylor and find they're in even worse trouble because he shrinks in the job. That's possible as well.
Yeah, okay. I haven't cleared that, so I won't get into that. But I just wanted to go through the numbers. How big is the Liberal Party room now, Jack?
Oh, I can't remember.
Top of your head? 28, right? I think 20.
I was going to say 30, but there you go.
28 is what they got. And I'm of course, including the LNP members who caucus in the Liberal Party. There's 10 of them.
So it won't take long to count the votes tomorrow.
It'll be over fairly quickly, yes. Yes. I guess the big issue is, and a lot of people have been saying this, including people on the right, have been saying this is really a spill over who gets to be the last leader of the Liberal Party.
Could be.
28 to 15. Look, to be honest, I keep saying this. I think the Nats are way more vulnerable from the One Nation attack than the Libs are, but certainly the Libs have got some problems in the regions where they do hold a few seats.
Do you think this is like the captain of the Titanic throwing his job open to see who else wants it at the last moment? I think I agree with you. I think the Nats are much more vulnerable than the Libs, really, quite honestly.
Look, Newspoll, one of the things about polls, they're not great at finding out how much the National Party vote is. It's always one thing you'll see represented as a 3 or a 4 when it actually might be a 5, because they're not sort of openly counted. Now, people at Redbridge and Newspoll, etc., might take issue with me, but I notice that thing pretty much all the time. But anyway, there is a Newspoll out, and it sort of confirms where we are, and this was one of Angus Taylor's attacks, that the Libs were losing essentially 7,000 voters a day. Voters might be a hard term. Votes a day, I think it mathematically is correct, but voters, of course, can come back. Again, Labor's vote hasn't changed since the 2025 election thumping, and the Libs have gone backwards while One Nation are in the solid 20s, Jack.
I thought the Labor vote had gone up and has now dropped back a little bit, but it's dropped back to where it was at the election.
Post-election. It hit, I think, at one stage, about a 36 or 7 in the Newspoll. Look, there was a lovely little exchange between Murray Watt during estimates, Jack. I don't know if you saw it, with Malcolm Roberts. We call him Teeny Weeny on the conditional release program. Malcolm Roberts was asking Murray Watt about immigration matters and what can be done to screen and vet our immigrants better. And Murray Watt gave him a bit of a pasting and said, well, we put up some legislation 2 weeks ago that you didn't vote for. that seemed to screen and vet people. You went out in the press after Bondi and said that you wanted all these preachers, deported out of the country. But then when we threw the bill up, you didn't want to have a bar of it. So there was a lovely little exchange. He's quite good on his feet. Is Murray Watt, Jack?
Yes, he is.
He's certainly the equal. Certainly the better, I would say, of Malcolm Roberts.
Now,
But
what's
anyway,
one of their better performers, I would have said.
Yeah. Well, how do you, if you're a Labor strategist, Jack, how do you go about dealing with the one nation threat, or just you don't bother? I mean, there is a sort of social cohesion aspect to all this too.
Well, you probably aren't you wiser? I haven't really thought this through, but I would. My first inclination would be to say, just let them battle it out with the Liberals and the Nationals, and don't interfere when your enemies are belling the crap out of each other.
Yeah, I was reaching for that Machiavellian quote, Jack. It might be confusing it with The Art of War, Sun Tzu's epic. But yes, don't get in the way while your opponents are making mistakes. That's what I would have thought would be the best outcome. Jack, I'm going to spring this little story on you, and I'll read it through so you can have time to consider it. There's been a High Court ruling in Australia now which sort of adds clarity on institutional liability for child sex offending, historical child sex offending, Jack. The Grawn reports the High Court has delivered a landmark win for survivors of clergy abuse, finding the Catholic Church had a duty of care to protect a child from one of its pedophile priests. A man known only as AA sued the Catholic Church's Newcastle and Maitland diocese over abuse he suffered at the hands of Father Ron Picken in 1969 when he was aged just 13. The abuse took place in a presbytery after Picken had offered AA and another boy alcohol and cigarettes. AA argued that the diocese was liable for his abuse because it owed him a non-delegable duty of care. In other words, a duty of care which could not be shifted to another entity or person, and had breached that duty by following his abuse. The church said it owed no such duty of care, and it had won in the New South Wales Supreme Court, but that has been now overturned in the High Court. Jack, your thoughts? I know I sprung it on you. I do apologise. It just caught my eye before we went to air, so to speak.
Preliminary reaction, I would say, this has been a battle the Catholic Church has been waging for 30 years, I think. It's got a labyrinthine structure, the Catholic Church, and it's hidden behind that to avoid liability for some of these cases, right? Not all of them, but some of them. My feeling was that was always going to end badly for them, because I thought that the courts were likely to find a way to sheet the liability home to them rather than let them skate through by virtue of a complicated structure, and that's where it's ended up.
I just take you back to a previous High Court ruling which essentially determined that the extent of liability was the death of that particular priest. It's not so much a precedent, but it has made the legal fraternity very concerned about future cases. This would seem to sort of add some clarity about what that duty of care was, regardless of what time had ensued. I'm not sure whether Father Ron Picken is still alive or not, but it makes it very clear, doesn't it, not just to the Catholic Church, but to institutions that have a history of child sexual abuse, that they would be liable now. There will be a number of lawyers who will be jumping up and down, Jack, and I don't mean that. I do mean that in a cynical way, but this would, I would think, certainly add to a lot of litigation that's going to occur.
Yeah, well, it will certainly clarify where it's going to end up. I mean, this is more or less ending up where I thought it would from a long time ago. I just thought that it's all very well to argue this stuff, and you might have, at least on the face of it, a pretty good argument. But the courts have historically not been very keen on letting people go uncompensated because the defendants had a complicated structure in which to operate. They just haven't been. Right? This happened with the waterside workers. They had a complicated employment structure, back in the day that people were on kind of basically day labouring a fair bit of the time, right? The individual stevedoring companies would argue that they had no responsibility, that this body who had no money and no insurance was the liable thinger. And eventually the courts looked behind that and said, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, look, there's a long history, as you say, to the Catholic Church and other institutions, it must be said, sort of trying to back their way out of not just back their way out of legal liability, but also do so in often sort of highly unethical ways, and it's just as if they're sort of looking for any loophole they can find. All right, Israeli President just touched down in Melbourne, Jack, Isaac Herzog, believed to be about 5,000 protesters there waiting for his arrival. And, of course, he's been in Sydney for 2 days. He led a morning ceremony on the Monday at the International Convention Centre in Darling Harbour, really, and then, of course, led to some protests. We'll get to that in a little while, but there's some media reaction you want to have a look at. Jack, Peter Cronau reckons that Herzog politicised his visit.
Yes, yeah, which was...
Well, what's the tweet? Saying the visit is also to explain the need for Israel to fight Hamas in Gaza. As predicted, Herzog is politicising the grief over the Bondi attack. Is this all, Cronau?
It is.
As predicted, Herzog is politicising the grief over the Bondi attack to support Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Herzog's words himself said he hoped his 4-day trip would help Australians better understand Israel's perspective on its fight against the hardline Islamic regime in Iran and terror groups it sponsors such as Hamas and Hezbollah. I think it's about time that the good relations between Israel and Australia will flourish and not be taken hostage by radical forces in Australia who have been undermining these relations. Well, it's politicising, but from the words that I've read that he's uttered, Jack, it's been a very graceful and gracious tour.
There's what I would call a very noisy but minority group in the country who are absolutely wedded to the idea that Israel's an apartheid state and committing genocide and therefore is an enemy of Australia. And they think that the idea that the head of state of Israel should visit Australia is completely wrong. I mean, and quite a few of these are in the media, and they're certainly very active on social media.
Probably worth reminding our listeners that Isaac Herzog, it's essentially a ceremonial position.
It is. It's like being a Governor General.
Exactly right. So the timing, as I understand it, is that the family members of those who suffered at Bondi, who were killed at Bondi, they made the request, and then the Albanese government made a formal request to the government of Israel to have Isaac Herzog visit. So on the Monday, Jack, in Sydney, I think some 6,000 Palestinian Action Group, or various protesters, but led by the Palestinian Action Group, assembled at the town hall in George Street. The International Convention Centre, some considerable distance away, walking, but this is what the police do in these events, and they utilised some of the laws they can use that are normally associated with major sporting events or major entertainment events, where they essentially lock off large chunks of the city. And the protesters assembled. They were told they had requested to go to the Parliament, to the New South Wales Parliament. That was denied, and they also sought to go to Hyde Park. That was also denied. They were essentially kettled, I think we can safely say, towards Central Station. Did you see some of the footage, Jack? Did you think
I did.
The cops had gone a bit too hard?
6,000 people, you say.
That was the estimated crowd.
I'm sure the man with the man bun, I saw him say on TV that there were 30,000 there.
Just least, well, there is always that mathematical issue, Jack, when it comes to those who were there. There was a further. I know there was a further rally called outside the Surrey Hills Police Station, and according to the reports I read, there were sort of 6 people there in their hundreds, not thousands. And look, there's always the issue of crowd numbers.
Yeah. Well,
did you think the police had gone a bit too hard? Was my original question.
Did I? I saw some video that looks like they did, and some that looks like that they were responding to a lot of aggravation. Yeah. So I mean, I'm always reluctant to give an opinion on that because you're not sure how much of it you're seeing, et cetera, et cetera. That will run its course, I suspect. I mean, my view of this is that I don't think that the protest view that Israel is committing genocide and Israel is an enemy of Australia is anything like a majority opinion. I mean, they're our ally. In my view, the Israelis, I mean, they're on the front line of the fight to keep Western civilization, and we should treat them that way.
Yes, I'm not sure that there'd be quite the support in polling numbers, though, Jack. I just sort of in regard to the police situation, what people do have to understand is that when police are called in this kind of operation, that is how they will respond. They will block off large tracks. They've been asked to keep 2 crowds separate. One group of 7,000 people described as mourners who were at the International Convention Centre where Isaac Herzog was. And probably, 3 kilometres away, there was a protest group. So police are called in to say, you can't go beyond there. You are just not allowed. And if there's pressure there, they will, as I say, kettle is the right term, Jack, is that they sort of rush the front of a crowd. And that might mean people get knocked over and get injured and all that sort of stuff. It certainly seems to be the case here. I just thought that the confluence of events that you had one group essentially mourning an outrageous terrorist incident in Australia, and how there should have been this, how sort of unpalatable it would be for that group of protesters to accost or to be in within at least shouting distance of the Israeli president.
It would be a very bad look for the country, in my opinion, if the people who were there mourning those 15 victims at Bondi were forced to walk past a baying mob, if you like.
Right. Yeah, and as I say, there is once the police are told to do something, they'll say, "This is the way we do it." We just locked down entire parts of the city. We might remember these things happen rarely. I do remember going into the Sydney CBD when it was all blocked off with the APAC visit, Jack. High security everywhere. We didn't know why at the time. I mean, you might remember that was the Great Chaser stunt, where what's his name, acting as Bin Laden.
Yeah.
Anyway, the real reason they were concerned about it, the police were so concerned, the security was so high to the point where the city was essentially fenced off, large chunks of it, all the way down to the rocks, pretty much from Park Street.
I can tell you it was Park Street. I had to go back to my office to pick something up. We were in Pacific Power Building, the large building across the road from you.
Yeah, I know where you are.
And there were blacked out Black Hawk helicopters dropping people on the roof in training. And one of my colleagues was a serving officer, and he said, "Yeah, this is what they're doing. It's partly practice and partly to a show of force."
The real reason, we got to find this out sometime later, Jack, is that I think off the top of my head, 12 rocket launchers had gone missing at Holsworthy Army Base. And I think at that stage, New South Wales Police had possession of one of them. So there was a real threat. I know one ended up in the hand of a gangster, southwestern Sydney gangster family that I won't name, and he went looking for one of his enemies. He had the head out of the car with a rocket launcher, basically looked at the building, went, yeah, it's just fibro, it's just going to go straight through the wall and out the other side, and then go boom somewhere else. So he didn't discharge the weapon.
To be fair, who hasn't lost track of 12 rocket launchers in their garage?
Well, it turned out there was a very dodgy staff sergeant there, Jack, and it was his job to basically provide all the paperwork, essentially an audit of weapons that had gone by their use-by date. And he was putting a few of them in the car at the end of the day. So he got found. He was sentenced to a decent spell in prison. Speaking of which, Jack, there's been a bit of a controversy because the New South Wales government is certainly open to its residential expansion, and this is going to affect historic Defence Force locations, Jack, including the Victoria Barracks in, what do we call that, Darlow, Paddo?
In Oxford Street, yes.
Speaking during a fireside chat.
A wonderful building, I've got to say.
Beautiful, and early colonial architecture and all that sort of stuff. You mentioned speaking during a fireside chat with incoming Herald editor Jordan Baker. Paul Scully said the New South Wales government was exploring its options in response to the federal government's decision to offload several prominent defence properties. So the feds have just gone, they're all yours. You want them for residential development, and New South Wales said, that land's going to be worth a few bob. So they're into it. Warren Brown.
Have you been in there?
I haven't been inside there, no. I know that they have pretty flash dinners, and you've got to wear, it's not my go, really, Jack.
I've been to lunch in the officers' mess at the Victoria Barracks, courtesy of a colleague who was a serving colonel, I think. And I've got to say that the food was good, but not, just good food, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't anything spectacular. But they, at least in those days, they had a very, very good wine list, and the rest of the afternoon sort of passed in a slight blur.
Bit of a missed scene missing, that sort of thing.
But it's just a wonderful setup. I mean, you look at it, and you really do think you're back in colonial times. I mean, it would be a shame to of all the places they could stick blocks of flats, that would be not the best place.
There obviously will be national heritage issues, Jack, arising from these. Well, my very good friend Warren Brown, cartoonist at the Daily Telegraph, is also very unhappy at that. Warren's, I guess, had time as a reservist with, I think, the Air Force. May be wrong, hopefully not, Warren, but also sort of a profound, has had profound sort of contact with returned servicemen and dawn services and those sorts of things. He's a
history buff.
Oh, definitely a history buff. But so he was terribly unhappy about this. I guess it's just what you do with it in the end, Jack.
Yeah, no, it's just going to need some imagination to find a use for it, but it would be a shame for it to go.
Lunch will no longer be served, Jack.
Yeah, I only had the one, right, but it was good.
All right, Tony Mockbell's out and about, Jack. He's free of all his charges. I think he got to snip the electronic bracelet off. Was it last week or early this?
Yeah, and he's looking forward to hopping on a nice plane, he said.
Is he?
Yes.
Heading off. What's the chances of him being refused re-entry.
Well, it probably depends where he chooses to go.
Yeah, well, okay. He was charged with a summary offence or a drug offence that allegedly had occurred after his release from prison, Jack. But those charges have been dropped, and now he is free to go. He was, of course, freed pending these charges after the Lawyer X scandal, Jack, which saw him speaking frankly and under legal privilege to an informant, to a police informant. Probably one of the worst things Vic Pol has done, I would think.
The Lawyer X thing, I think a kind assessment would be it was a monumental cock-up. You know, I mean,
how come no one went to jail over this, Jack?
I don't think that there are sometimes that people want to investigate things and sometimes that people don't.
Lose the paperwork. Is that what happened?
This is one of the second ones, right? Because you never know. You wouldn't, if he's really started investigating that, you wouldn't know where it's going to end up.
There were at least two Victorian Chief Commissioners who were in the frame.
Yes.
Had certainly knowledge of this. Just as
who were in the room.
They went all the way to the High Court, costing taxpayers millions to protect essentially this conspiracy.
Yes. So I've got to say, I think that snipping Mockbell's bracelet off is the best possible thing to do now, because this was just going to go. Sometimes you get to a point where this is a complete mess. What's the best thing we can do now? Right?
Well, according, if we look at his arrest photograph and compare him to now, Jack, all that time in jail seems to have, he's lost all his hair. He's very bald. He's a very hairy man when he was arrested in Greece, Jack. You remember the Irish jig? Yeah.
He was wearing a terrible rug, wasn't he?
When they arrested him, the Greek wallopers gone, I know, this will be a funny joke. And they just stuck it on his head. And took the mugshot. So Tony's gone, leaving, and the racetrack will never be the same again, Jack. He used to turn up at Moonee Valley, Flemington, etc., throwing a lot of money around the old days.
Yes, some people allege that was money laundering, but I'd make no comment.
If you're a good punter, you get at least a half decent punter, you get 75-80% back, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And if the money's really dirty, if you get 50% back, that's fine. Yeah,
better than taking it to the bank. The United Kingdom, Jack, Keir Starmer, has he weathered this storm yet? It certainly doesn't look like it. His appointment of Mandelson, who's just all over the Epstein files, not just all over the Epstein files, but all over the Epstein files in his underpants, with further evidence that he may have breached the Official Secrets Act, UK's Official Secrets Act, and a raft of other potential crimes, Jack. And, of course, Keir Starmer appointed him to be the UK's ambassador to the United States in Trump Town.
Did you watch the video of Kemi Badenoch? About 10 minutes in what they call Prime Minister's Questions, which is better than Question Time these days in the Australian Parliament. And it was, I hadn't thought she was this smart. This was a masterclass. She starts off with 5 minutes or so of fairly softball questions about what did you know, when did you know it, sort of stuff, all that kind of thing. And he's handling this pretty well, and you can see him growing in confidence, right? And then she dropped the boom. She said, "You got a security assessment, from the security services before you appointed Mandelson. Did they mention? Yeah. Did they mention the Epstein files, and what did they say?"
Of course
and he stood up, and he could have not answered that question. He could have stood up and said, "Well, this is a national security issue, etc., etc." I'm not at liberty to say. He stood up and said, "Yes, they did." Right? And at that moment, I thought, you are toast, son. You know?
Look, he may not. I've tipped that he will go by the end of the year, but he may not make it that far.
The problem is for the Labor caucus, they don't call it that, for the Parliamentary Labor Party, is that whoever comes next is likely to be even less electable. They're going to be further to the left, very keen on big government, very keen on government spending on anything else except defence.
I'd go back just a step. I'd say whoever becomes leader, if it happens soon, is still going to have to wear a lot of this Epstein-Mandelson stuff. They're going to have to work through that, and a British public, at least, I can't speak for the Northern Irish, Jack, a British public that are just absolutely appalled about all this. I mean, that goes to the Epstein files, but Mandelson's conduct in particular, and of course, the threat is almost becoming existential for the royal family, or at least that would be, look, this, you know how this ends, the worst way this can end. If they're in their crisis management meetings, Jack, that could be the way it ends. They've got some problems there too. And I mean, look, if we needed, just let me finish. If we needed further evidence of what a piece of shit Fergie is, I think we can draw a line under that now.
She's planning a comeback, by the way. I saw the paper yesterday.
Sure. I mean, on the talk circuit, she's actually dobbed her own daughter into having a shagging weekend, talking to Epstein, who is a convicted pedophile.
Yeah. I tell you how deep
a convicted pedophile.
Yeah, I tell you how deep Starmer is in the problem. Is in the per now. Is that what he's saying now? Is he's just outraged that people lied to him. Right? They lied and lied again. It's not just Mandelson, but one of his comms person who he appointed to the House of Lords. He's just removed the whip from because the comms person was best mates with and standing up for a bloke who's been pled guilty and convicted for having child sex images. Right?
Not Epstein, but
another
child sex offender.
But this bloke's a former director of public prosecutions, a KC, a really senior lawyer. Part of your job when you're a lawyer is to understand that people are going to tell you lies, and it's your job to work out, as best you can, just how much of it's BS and how much of it's not. It's just not good enough for a senior lawyer to say someone lied to me, right?
Well, Mandelson must have been, just promised the job. And so, therefore, anything that came in the way, including a security, what we call it, Jack, a concern raised, certainly a very serious concern raised about, it would come from MI5 about Mandelson's involvement with Epstein, and he's just charged ahead and done it. I mean, in the end of the day, you can see he's a very bright bloke and all, but in the end, he's just been dumb and dumb again.
What do I think happened? I think they said, well, we know all this about Mandelson. Some of it's on the public record. We know a lot more than's on the public record, but we think he's the best person to handle a tricky situation, so we're going to go ahead and appoint him anyway. Right? And they got that wrong.
So there's no heir apparent. No one's sticking the hand up. Is there? Give me some names of those who might. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, he was denied entry because he was a potential risk for. He'd be actually, you would think, give Labor a bit of a breath of fresh air from this,
and he would probably have the numbers to beat Starmer straight away. But he's not going to be in the Commons. So
not allowed. No, they wouldn't pre-select him.
So at the moment, the choices are Angela Rayner, the former deputy,
next.
Ed Miliband.
Next.
Yeah. Wes Streeting, who's also a mate of Mandelson, and it appears in the Mandelson, a mate of Mandelson, and a close friend of Mandelson. And the list gets worse from there, I can tell you. So it's just not. I mean, this may keep Starmer in a job for quite some months. I think the fact that the alternatives are worse.
But the greater threat is that the party will just start collapse, or the support for the party around the country will just collapse.
I saw a little clip yesterday of the end of Prime Minister's questions. The numbers on the Labor side were thinning out a fair bit towards the end. They were in need of a bathroom break, or had a call coming, or
a bit busy. Ooh. Yeah. Oh, feel that little pang in the bladder. Better hop out. Better hop out of the comments.
That's always a bad sign when they won't sit through the end of question time.
Yeah. Now we do have. We'll move on to the States, and we may as well stick with the Epstein files, Jack, and their impact in the United States. Firstly, the Clintons have said they're going to give evidence. They were not going to be heard in secret. They were not going to be filmed, and they said that they could have been used against them in a sort of edited copy, in edited footage. Bill said, "I will not sit idly as they use me as a prop in a closed-door kangaroo court by a Republican Party running scared. If they want answers, let's stop the games and do this the right way in a public hearing where the American people can see for themselves what this is really about." Hillary says, so let's stop the games. If you want this fight at Rep. James Comer, let's have it in public. You'll have to talk about transparency. There's nothing more transparent than a public hearing. Cameras on. We will be there. So can I just add before we go on to there is absolutely zero to prove that Clinton had any contact with Epstein after his conviction. And I think that conviction date is a really significant one. You know, there were so many people who just said, men, who just went, Woody Allen and all of these characters who just went, Chomsky. Yeah, I don't care that you've been convicted of pedophilia. You're still my buddy.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
My take on that is that if I were Representative James Comer, I would be a little nervous because the Clintons are warriors and they will fight dirty if they have to. You know, you have. This is an Admiral Yamamoto at Pearl Harbor moment. We have awoken a giant.
Yeah. And as I say, there really is no evidence, not in the Epstein files. I went AIing and scanning this, yes. Jack, and there's no evidence that he knew or had contact with Epstein after Epstein's conviction. So 2008, 2009, that is, he was, I think, initially convicted in 2008 and released in 2009. His rather soft time in the Palm Beach county lockup, Jack. He could get away for weekends and just pop in there really during the day and, you know, answer a few emails.
He was popping back in the evening for dinner and sleep. Right?
Yeah.
He was allowed out to his office, which in fact was his home, to work during the day. Right?
Yes, you're right, absolutely right. So that's it. So who else have we got in this? I mean,
Deepak Chopra was on the list.
Noam Chomsky, Jack.
Yeah.
Noam Chomsky.
Yes, and these are all quite recent. One thing I will say about this is that I don't think there's ever been a better networker than Jeffrey Epstein. His Rolodex had everybody name of any importance in it somewhere, didn't it? You know.
Well, it was money, and it was in other cases the offer of child sexual abuse and prostitution generally.
And the thing is, we don't know where that crossover is. I mean, my personal view is I'm not thinking the worst of Woody Allen or Noam Chomsky because they hung around with him. I'm thinking I don't know is my answer, is my response to that. famous people like hanging out with famous people.
All of that, but you do get this sense of that this was all a bit of compromise, that this was all a bit of honeypotting. So
could be, but I want to see some evidence of that before I accepted that of someone like Noam Chomsky or Woody Allen. Right?
There have been 6 people named. Now this comes from I think the House Judicial Committee. And they were able to see unredacted files, and they said there was still 70 or 80% of those unredacted files were still redacted, and a number of them came away. And these people have since been publicly named. That there were 6 that they believe 6 co-conspirators. Some of these people essentially businessmen and prominent individuals, but not, shall we say, VIPs or well known in the public domain. And these 6 people have since been named, but yet the DOJ says nothing further to see here. And that I think that's the bit that gets all of us, but certainly certainly those living in America, in the United States.
Yeah. Anyway, my position is that just because you're named in there, I'm not going to immediately assume the worst. I'm going to wait until there's something worse to tie you to some of the worst excesses of it.
US midterms, Jack. If they go pretty well in the House, the Dems, then we're bound to see a lot more stuff, aren't we? That's when that will happen. But there are, well, I guess, one of the lessons we've learned from the Epstein file dump is that. It takes people a long time to read 3.5 million pages. The original reporting was sort of all over the shop, but now you've got this group of men who either, and this is really the ethical offence, if you like, that were hanging around Epstein either for the influence he brought, or for child sexual activities or prostitution, after he was a convicted paedophile. Those people, the ones that like Chomsky and others, these continued to see him after his conviction.
I would add one more reason to hang out there, just because they wanted to hang out with the other people he had contact with. That's a powerful motivator. And as to post 2008, not all of these people are going to be aware of what we know about the 2008 convictions, and there are all sorts of, people, I could see that some of these people are going to have said, and Noam Chomsky might have said, well, look, he's done his time.
It's just Florida law, don't worry about it. It was one count of procuring a child for the purpose of prostitution, Jack.
Yes, but then.
So if you're inquiring about, I better just Google up Jeffrey Epstein in 2009. That's what you're going to get.
Yes. But
so where's the judgment, or where's the care?
There's very little judgment in that. Yeah. What I'm saying is, I'm not going to burn people like Deepak Chopra and Noam Chomsky.
You don't have to burn people as child sex offenders. There's, as I say, not the evidence to draw those conclusions. What you can assert comfortably is that these people continue to have contact with Epstein despite a serious conviction for a child sex offence. So there you go.
That's not quite enough for me.
But you still knock around with him. G'day, Jeffrey. How you going, mate? Can you drop me 10 grand? Look, I'm being silly, but that's the thing for me. You can forget about the law and those sorts of things as far as I'm concerned. That's the ethical line that was crossed. And that's the conclusion that we can draw about the morality of these people, Jack. Moving on, Washington Post. It's going to be a little lighter and I shouldn't laugh about these things. There have been major staff cuts. They will no longer be reporting sport. The New York Times doesn't have sport in its print version anymore, but they do, of course, have I think it's one of the big sporting magazines that they sort of throw into their website.
Is it The Athlete? Is that what it's called?
Something, The Athlete, I think it is, yeah. So, but the Washington Post do not have that luxury. So Jeff Bezos, who, hand on heart, a couple of years ago said, "Gee, I just feel this place's pulse. I love it. I always want it to be doing its best things," has essentially cut the guts out of it. And not a lot of people are happy, Jack.
No. If you look at their circulation figures, they actually got a bit of a bump in Trump's first term by going all in on being anti-Trump. And then it faded away. I suspect because the New York Times were doing that better, really.
I think so. I would think so in terms of the number of scoops.
Yep.
The NYT has been a fair way ahead of the Washington Post. Washington Post has not been idle, but the NYT's probably led there just in sheer numbers.
I think the lesson I take out of this is that if you're going to run a national newspaper, you've got to kind of stand for something and stick to it.
Look, these are, I don't need to tell our listeners, these are very tough times for newspapers. The fact that Jeff Bezos is, I think, the second wealthiest man in the world. It varies from day to day. But he is the owner, I guess, is one of those areas where the sort of the waters become muddy. I mean, in the end, it's a profit and loss business. And if the figure at the end of it is in the red, then you've got a problem.
He's a very, very rich man, but I think losing $100 million a year would still cause you some hurt, I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Nate Silver I think he's now working for CBS, Jack, is that right?
I think that's correct, yeah.
Used to run his own website, of course. He said, "The cuts at the Post are devastating and my heart goes out to everyone affected. To state the obvious, there's no reason to be sympathetic to Bezos or any of the other leaders there. The paper's influence really cratered following the editorial shifts in 2024-25. We'll explain that in a moment. He shows, Silver then shows graph. The Washington Post reportedly laid off 14 of its 19 climate change reporters. There is certainly a correlation between the non-nomination from the Washington Post prior to the 2024 presidential election and a cratering of sales, as Nate Silver puts it, Jack.
Yeah, when you say the non-nomination, that they didn't nominate, they didn't support.
Well, they did it for they were going to, and then they didn't. Yeah.
They didn't support the election of Kamala Harris, and I think that's right. Like I say, I think you've got to, if you're going to be in this sort of business, you've got to have a brand and you've got to stick to it. You can't just waver around in the wind. You know?
I think that's really sensible. Having said that, Jack, what are newspaper nominations worth? In this country, for example, I would say virtually nothing.
Couldn't tell you who supported anybody in the last 30 years, to be quite honest. I think if I go back to the early days of the early days of the Australian, they were pro Whitlam for
74.
leading up to 1972, 74, and then turned against him in 75. But that's the last newspaper endorsement I can remember.
Oh,
the rest of my
if we look at state and federal politics, it does sort of jump around the place. The SMH is, I think they supported Albanese. I'm fairly sure the Oz, as a conservative newspaper, supported the Libs, the coalition. But as I say, I don't think newspaper endorsements count for anything.
If they were important,
editors of newspapers themselves will tell you how little the editorials that they write or are written are read in the paper and online.
If you and I thought they were important, if they were important, we'd probably know what they were, and we don't. is the answer.
Yeah. All right. Japan, Jack. Thumping win for Sanai Takaichi. Record, I think. The LDP may have a 2/3 majority, giving them a super majority, which allows them to change the constitution, Jack. And that leads to a bit of militarisation. 1930 style? No, let's not get too far ahead. But yes, that is one of the issues.
It does give them the option of making those constitutional changes. This has not been well received. The election result has not been well received in Beijing, I can tell you.
No, there is a bit of an anti-China element to it. So, and there is a fair bit of history between the two countries, Jack, and a fair bit of antagonism, certainly post-war, with allegations, certainly from the Chinese, that I would think would have fairly well founded that Imperial Japan's barbarity in mainland China and elsewhere was the Japanese had consistently tried to understate. And the Japanese governments did that. So that's always been a point of tension. But there is a bit of, I don't know, there's a bit of the Maggie Thatcher's a bit. Well, that's her role model. But Takaichi, she's dumped a whole lot of money into the Japanese economy, into consumers' pockets, which is a very, very clever election tactic, Jack. Drop someone the equivalent. I think we went through it last week. It was, in the region of a gorilla here and a monkey there.
Just getting back to the Japanese-Chinese history, I mean, most of us kind of think of the Pacific War as starting at Pearl Harbor in 1942. But of course, if you're Chinese, that's about 8 years too late.
Hello, Manchuria.
All the time before that. If you get the sort of majority she's getting, you're kind of doing something right.
Well, it does prove, Jack, that a little bit of economic stimulus and then call a snap election is not a bad tactic if you want to win one. That's where we are.
She should perhaps ring Downing Street.
Throw a bit of money. Trouble is, they don't have that much money. Look, the amount of spending that she's done recently, prior to the election, actually caused markets to sort of stop and look at debt. We're talking about the UK and debt. Japan's in a fair amount of it too, it caused their bond markets to run high or run heated, and that was just on that. So we'll have to watch it. You can't keep throwing money around that you don't have is the basic rule of thumb, and we could also acknowledge that it hasn't quite ticked over yet, the $1 trillion worth of public debt, Jack, but in Australia, but it won't be long.
I can tell you, spoken to quite a few friends over the last couple of weeks who've been up in Japan recently, and you can't move for tourists up there at the moment.
It's a real tourist hotspot at the moment. You're absolutely right about that.
That's because the yen is so low. It's always been a great place to visit, but it was expensive. Now it's a great place to live and not expensive.
Well, as we said,
to visit. Sorry,
last year in outer suburban Japan, you can buy a house for next to nothing, which has attracted a few people in Sydney and Melbourne have been paying look to pay through the nose to live locally and have set themselves up in Japan. We also had a Thai election, Jack. And Prime Minister Anutin, I knew you were going to do this to me, Chanavarakul, has claimed victory in Thailand's general election. When you get to a Thai name or sometimes a Sri Lankan name, you just draw a breath and just yell it out as it sounds. I'm sure I buggered it up. But he's claimed victory, and he represents the ruling Conservative Party in Thailand, Jack.
He does. There were some people were talking up the opposition that they might be a chance, but it looks to me like the Thais have opted for stability.
Yes, I mean, he was...
No great love of the government, but they would rather that than the lack of stability.
The Prime Minister has been re-elected in Thailand. What are we talking about in terms of results, Jack? Has it been an overwhelming vote of confidence?
No, I wouldn't call it overwhelming. I haven't seen the final figures, but it's a solid win. And as I say, it's a people saying we'd rather that than go back to a situation where if the other side win, does the army step in and say, no, even though you won, you can't form a government?
All right. Well, just before we start our sports coverage, I received a very lovely letter from one of our Western Australian listeners, Jack, who told me and congratulated us for getting it right on the video of the fellow we might who was standing out the front of a strip club when his mate threw a chair at one of the bouncers and only managed to hit this bloke and clock him and knock him over. And he said, our listener has said that Greg has said that we were one of the few to say that it was a strip club, and everyone else was calling it a nightclub, Jack. Bit of media amelioration there, use of euphemism. Or maybe they just got lazy and said King Street must be a nightclub.
King Street was never my territory at all when I lived in Melbourne. But is there a difference between strip club and nightclub in King Street?
Yes. Well, maybe you haven't been in as many as I have. I would go on to the strip clubs, that is. I would go on to explain that when I was deputy editor of the Scoop magazine, it was essentially my job to find talent, and the only place to go to find talent was in the various strip clubs in Sydney at the time. It was actually quite a lovely thing. I could just show my card at the door, walk straight in, almost, sort of Trump-like, walk into the dressing rooms, talk to the girls and see. And I did that for about a year, which was rather lovely. Not just that, I did, I was deputy editor of the magazine, far more serious matters. But yes, that was one of my jobs. To be brutally frank, I haven't been in a strip club since. But there you go. Sport now, as we move on past the hour. The T20 World Cup, Jack. I love watching cricket. I am addicted to it more than most. And I've been watching all of the minnow games. Did you see the South Africa v Afghanistan game at all last night?
No, I didn't see anything last night. Hang on. No, I didn't see any of that last night. No. I saw a little bit of the Aussies playing. The
South Africa v Afghanistan game, the last over was bowled by Rabada, who bowled 2 no balls. Include the second one, I think, was and the Afghan side were 9 down, led to a dismissal. Of course, not a dismissal, as this was no ball. So there was a bit of cheering going on for the South Africans until the third umpire intervened and everyone had to go back because essentially the game was drawn, and then we go into a super over situation. And they went into that super over situation. Afghanistan got, I think, 17, which is a pretty handy score against some pretty good bowling. A pretty good attack in Keedy and Kenny and Rabada, namely 2. They got some good spinners, but they let the quick go. Ngidi bowl that over. He went for 17. So South Africa had to chase those down. They got to 17, and that well, no one was quite sure what to do after that. But the umpires convened, and they went into another super over. This one only 5 balls, but it seemed, and I'll need to sort of clarify this, and hopefully one of our listeners does, but it seemed to be they could Duckworth Lewis the 5 balls to 6. And that's what happened. They had to chase way too many, the Afghan team, and they fell well short in the third super over session, Jack. It was quite amazing. And either side could have won. In fact, the last ball was the Afghan bats were 9 down, trying to turn a 1.5 into a 2 and just got run out by, you'd say, a centimetre. So very, very close. Terrific game. Cricket, I've never seen anything quite like it. And when you think about the rules for having a super over and then a super over and then a super over, what are the chances of it happening again?
Yeah.
Probably never. So, well, maybe not never, but not for a long time. Australia got their campaign underway with a solid win over Ireland. You would only call it that. The wicket they were playing on didn't look right for T20 cricket for me. They were playing in Sri Lanka, of course.
In Colombo. The wicket was slow and the outfield was slow. It made it hard to hit. The games that impressed me was, the Scots got in with only a few days' notice because the Bangladeshis boycotted, I think, right? And I watched a bit of the Scots the other day, and they looked like a lot of plump club cricketers who'd been enjoying the off-season who were thrust onto the world stage because they are, and they played like that. But they were having a hell of a good time doing it, so credit to them. The game that I really loved, though, was Nepal and England.
Yes, I was going to talk about that too. Go on.
Have quite a few Nepalese friends. They're very big in the food and beverage and hospo businesses here in Hong Kong. So I watched the English innings with a few of them, and I've got to say they had a good game plan. They stuck to it, even when England threatened to kind of swamp them and push them about. They executed really well, and they got within 4 runs of winning. This would have been a terrific ball. And let's face it, beating England, having Nepal beat England would be good.
Would have been just a perler. But I did see the game too, and look, they dropped a catch. It was a tough one in the last over. That would have put England 8 down, and that would have been Jacks dismissed, and they may well have won the game from there.
Yes.
So it was a bit sad. Having said that about the drop catch, their fielding was magnificent.
Yes,
their ground fielding was great. They held their catches, bar one. They were very, very good and professional, and I thought, well, who coaches them? And you know?
No.
Stuart Law.
Stuart Law, okay.
He'd be the one to be saying to him, it doesn't matter how good you are with the bat and with the ball, you can field it. So they attacked the ball in the field all day, picked it up cleanly, got to throw away. Really, really impressive. So good on them. It's their first tournament in the big time, Jack, at the elite level.
But they were terrific. And look, with 2 or 3 overs of their innings to go, I was getting quite excited because I was already counting my days to the weekend to catch up with some English friends and smear it all over them because they were going to win.
We were all thinking that, Jack.
They were going to win. It took a terrific Sam Curran final over to knock them back.
I just think the game was almost there, and of course England got beaten last night, Jack. So Jeffrey Boycott's been on the wine, has been on the complaint ever since, and I reckon Root should be there. He's the best player who's been in England. I don't think there's too much doubt about that. And he's not, of course, touring. Stephen Smith not touring for Australia, of course.
I think Smith's on the way, actually.
Is he? I haven't heard that because they can replace. They've got 2 on the bench in Cummins and Hazelwood, so they can bring one in.
Someone's injured. I can't remember who, but someone's injured.
Well, Mitch Marsh didn't play last night. I don't think it's Mitch who's out. But as I say, they've got Cummins. I looked at the squads last night. You've got Cummins and Hazelwood, who were originally named who are not in, and you can have one unannounced. One drop out. You can't have 2 without an ability to replace them. So that might explain Steve Smith. Also in the squad is Tim David, coming back from a hammy in the BBL, and he, as I keep telling people, is one of the biggest hitters around. I think you put Mitch Marsh in that side too, and they might give it a shake. Not too many people have given them have given them much chance, but they could give it a chance. You could give it a shake. India look very good, as do New Zealand, who, after South Africa struggled against Afghanistan to win, New Zealand accounted for them fairly comfortably. Great to see the Minnows playing, Jack. Oman, they need Stuart Law, put it that way. Just not great in the field and losing a bit of interest there when they're getting well beaten. Now, Jack, on Saturday night at Optus Stadium, I think 7:30 kickoff, probably Eastern time, is the AFL State of Origin. Can I ask you, who cares? Does anyone care? If you're an AFL fan, Carlton have got two blokes in there, Jacob Wiedering and Patrick Cripps. Just don't get in. Please don't get injured.
That's the thing, isn't it? The AFL started State of Origin. It predates the NRL State of Origin by a couple of years, but it's just never taken off. I mean, people tell me they had big crowds a few times, and they did. They had 90,000 at a South Australian Victorian game, but nothing like the passion that flows to the NRL State of Origin. I used to like the old state games. They were exhibition games, but they were good to watch. But that's all this will be.
Well, the Rugby League State of Origin, Jack, initially was like the old bad days of the VFL one, where they'd play South Australia. But if you're a VFL player from South Australia, you got to play for Victoria. So they did that. And that no one paid much attention to that. And then all of a sudden they said, no, it depends on where you were born, or, well, I think it's where you played your club football now.
Where you first played club football, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the NRL. Oh, look, look, it's February. These guys will be playing in, I think it's 22 days. I just look at this from a club point of view and go, please don't get injured. Meanwhile, Jack, Rugby World Cup in 2027 will kick off in Perth, Optus Stadium, or
I don't know because the first
to be the Optus Stadium, wouldn't you? Anyway, they're playing Hong Kong, Jack.
Yeah, well, this is the Wallabies playing Hong Kong. The chances of filling
builder,
but the chances of filling Optus Stadium for that are, I would have thought very, very small. I've already spoken to some Sydney rugby fans. Are you going across to watch them play Hong Kong? No.
Well, there are a lot of English there, a lot of New Zealand, Kiwis in Perth, of course, a lot of South Africans.
Yeah.
But I still don't think they're going to get enough there to fill it. I don't know.
And look, Hong Kongers are kind of quite proud of our rugby team that they're even there, but are they going to hop on the burner to Perth to watch them get bollocks by the Wallabies? I don't think so.
She'll fly to Europe. It's about that far away. All right, Winter Olympics.
And flying to Europe will be cheaper.
Yes, Winter Olympics, Jack. Have you been watching? Geez, there have been some horrific injuries.
I have. Can I say that the bloke I shared a flat with for a while, we used to watch the downhill skiing that used to come on as you'd wandered in from a dinner somewhere, and you could fire up a ciggy and watch half an hour of the downhill, and it was quite good television. It's even better now. They have a drone that follows the skier, and it's absolutely riveting television. It's just one of those things that it fits on the screen and it works. But I haven't been watching all that much of it. I think it's good fun. Well, it's kind of more fun than the Summer Olympics, really.
I think you're right. It's just, for me, it's just come right in the middle of the T20 World Cup, and I am seriously watching 3 games because the first one starts at 4. I might miss the start. And the last one starts at 12:30. Well, I'll certainly fall asleep during that one. So I'm on the 3 games of cricket a day at the moment, and that's just not enough time in the day to be watching the Winter Olympics. All right. Well, that takes us out, unless you've got something there for you, Jack.
No, nothing. It's been a very dull week. Although we have a big change in Hong Kong this week. Well, not just yet, but it's on its way. The government is going to allow dogs inside restaurants.
What was the compulsion from people to do that? What was the agitation?
I really don't know. But yep, they're going to allow dogs in
I've got a
restaurants.
million jokes here, Jack, but they're all terribly racist, so
yes,
I'm just going to leave it alone.
I thought I'd tempt you. This was a dolly sitting up halfway down the track, just dying to be put away.
Sometimes it's just better to shoulder arms, Jack. Yeah. All right, well, that does take us out for this week. We'll get back to you next week to see if Angus has got the numbers. It would be hugely funny if he fell flat in his ass tomorrow, but we don't think it'll happen. And we'll be back next week with all that sort of analysis. He might even get a little spike in the polls. You'd expect at least 3 or 4%, unless otherwise you wouldn't do it, Jack. If you're in the party room,
you would.
So we'll see about all of that as we go in weeks ahead. Thanks for your opinions and wisdom today, Jack, and we'll be back next week, folks, with episode 145. See ya.